From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
House Ethics Committee.
Today with special guest David McDavid, Chief of Police of Zachary, Louisiana, to discuss the Baton Rouge Serial Killer case. Remember, if you've got a tip for Melissa on anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. She'll walk a mile in your shoes, so long as they're comfortable, backless, and don't cause blisters. Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Oh, I'm not really much on walking in other people's shoes, but you do have the description. You have the description.
Yeah.
I have weird feet and I mean, they're not especially odd
They're
shaped,
really
but
beautiful feet.
Oh yeah, beautiful feet.
They are.
God, you're fucking weird.
No,
anyway.
they are.
I
mean, I don't have a foot fetish or anything, but
thank goodness.
They're very beautiful feet.
Well, thanks, weirdo. Anyway, yeah, no, I did give a pair of shoes off my feet to Anne, who a yoga teacher at Still Yoga in Los Feliz, because she left her house without, she woke up. Yeah, remember I gave her a pair of my Havaianas flip-flops that I was like, these aren't that comfortable. And we both were the same size. And she grew to love them and wore them all the time. I did actually give someone the shoes right off my feet, but only because I carry backups in my car.
Well,
I
that's
always
true.
have. Yeah.
Right.
I always have a pair of flip-flops in the back of my car
Or two or three.
Or 2 or 3 or 7. Shut up. God damn it. I have a lot of flip-flops because basically I wear flip-flops, Uggs, and the occasional pair of dress sandals to a wedding or a funeral or a nice dinner, but not that often. You can usually in California you can get away with wearing flip-flops even to fancy restaurants.
Yeah. Or guys can wear tennis shoes. It's really
right.
sad.
It is sad.
sad.
It is sad. Before, when I lived in Kentucky and Ohio and wore dressy clothes to manage a comedy club because it's a show, right? And before I moved out here, I was like, so what's it like when you're, managing a comedy club in Southern California? And people were like, it's casual. It's like business casual. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I show up and everyone looks like fucking Jimmy Buffett.
Right, exactly.
And a goddamn Hawaiian shirt and blown out flip-flops and khaki shorts and that's the people that own Tesla or something. I mean,
exactly.
But I always carry.
We're kind of crude out here, but
crude.
Yeah.
Oh, you're kind of casual.
The way we dress.
Well, you're crude because basically you leave the house the few times a month that you do now with your fly down. Just, I don't know what he ran errands today. Tipsters comes home. After being gone all day, and I'm like, your fly's open. He's like, oh, great.
Yeah, because I was out in public at the
3 different stores or something.
3 or 4 different stores and running errands and
and with his fly down,
the thing is, I think as I get older, there's just some things. I mean, here's the thing: it's like
do not blame your dotage
it's my
as
dotage.
You have done this.
It is
from the moment I met you. You did it your whole life. Your mom told me.
This is really the thing is that I'm so relieved after going to the bathroom. I just it's so oh God.
You can't even muster the strength to zip your fly?
I'm reveling in it. Okay, I'm just going to go wash my hands.
You're weird.
At least I remember to wash my hands. And
you do. Now you wash your hands obsessively. You're like a raccoon.
And I did that even before.
Yeah, you are an obsessive. He'll wash his hands before getting in the shower.
No, that's ridiculous.
It is not. That's who you are.
No.
I was trying to say before we got onto the topic of your fly is that I keep shoes in the back of my car because I am a sissy. And shoes with backs of any kind usually rub blisters. I do have a couple pair of tennis shoes now that I wear to walk Siren because it's not always comfortable to wear flip-flops to walk a couple of miles. It's it's difficult. But so yeah, I do have a couple, but they call them mules because they don't have a back. So my tennis shoes don't have a back to them. I slide in but I get blisters on my heels if I wear shoes.
Well, that's why you can't walk a mile in everybody's shoes.
I don't want to walk a mile in anyone's shoes. I think that's disgusting. But I thought
it
was so sweet that Anne was so happy with those flip-flops. I was like, I don't like these. And I have others in the back of my car. Just take them. She's like, are you sure? And I'm like, take them. And then every time after that I saw her, she had them on. She loves them. So
Wow.
that was a good thing that they went to her. I think that's important. That's what life's about, right? Giving people the shoes off your feet.
See, I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sharing your shoes.
Yes.
Yeah. But take my word for it. I'm not walking a mile in anyone else's shoes. That's not happening.
Well, you walk a mile in the shoes of the victims and of the
No, I don't.
families and
Stop
of the
it.
police
Not
law
even,
enforcement.
Not even a
You
2
do.
feet.
You
No,
do.
No, we do what we can, but we don't walk in their shoes. Everyone has their own journey, right? And so I have no idea. I've never lost a family member or a friend to any kind of a violent thing like this, but it's the thing we can do is somehow maybe shine a light, a small light, a pen light on these terrible things that are, that happen, that I still to this day don't understand how. I don't, I try to have empathy, like hurt people end up hurting people, but I know so many people that have been hurt, that have had really difficult lives and families and experiences, and they don't turn around and hurt someone else. Typically, they become extremely, compassionate and empathetic. They don't, I don't know what the percentage is of hurt people who hurt people, but I'm getting tired of using that as an excuse. I don't know anyone that hasn't been hurt.
Yeah, well, everybody's been hurt.
Exactly.
But I'm going to guess that the percentage is very low.
I
the
hope
people
so.
That really, yeah.
I hope so, because, even this case, episode 3 of and the name, I don't like the name they gave him, which is the Baton Rouge serial killer, is, I'm just going to call him the key collector. So episode 3 of the key collector, we were really had a wonderful time talking to Chief David McDavid, who's just the salt of the earth human being, and got into law enforcement to get the bad guy. And he got the bad guy when others were not even close to getting the bad guy. He was like, look over here. This is a bad guy, and we need to get him off the streets.
Yeah.
And he kept going until he got him off the streets.
He did, and he kept raising his hand, and he was ignored. He was basically told, "Oh no, this is
he doesn't fit the profile."
Doesn't fit the profile. And the thing is, what you will hear from this just incredibly generous, humble fellow is that he does not seem to bear any grudges.
He does
over
not.
it,
He does not. And something else that I thought was so interesting is that when they finally got Derrick Todd Lee, with the majority of his help, honestly, he said he was at some sort of an event, maybe a press conference, where there were profilers and FBI agents and many members of different law enforcement agencies in South Louisiana that were on this task force. And he said someone from like a state level came up to him and, clapped him on the back and said, thank you for catching a serial killer. And what's great about him? He's like, I don't remember who it was though.
Right. Exactly.
It was someone who was like a big wig in government, and he didn't remember. He's like, I don't remember who it was, but somebody congratulated me like it was, all me. And he is just so humble that it's like, oh no, it definitely took a village. And yeah, he's a fascinating guy. And you could not believe how overjoyed I was when he agreed for an interview, because I saw him on is it called The Mark of a Killer on the ID Network? And I just fell madly in love with him. I was like, this guy is the shit. And he just couldn't care less. I think he just gets up, and then the next day he goes back to work and does his job. And he's a really spectacular human being. And I will also say this, no offense to anyone else we have interviewed in law enforcement, he was the most prepared
oh my God.
person.
He had notes. You could tell he was reviewing notes as he was talking to us.
He wanted to get every date right, every detail right. That's the kind of thing that I just respect the hell out of. It's not just him recounting, something that happened quite a while ago, even though it was a big event. He really wanted to make sure he got the details right for the victims, for the family members of the victims. He wanted to make sure their stories were told correctly. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Chief David McDavid, as you will hear. So if you like this episode, we ask you to think about going to Apple Podcasts and give us a rating or a review if you have the time to sit down and write a review. We're really grateful for all of you who have done that. It means the world to us, and it helps.
It does, and don't forget to subscribe to the
podcast. Yeah, it helps people find us, which I am kind of not great at marketing, so I had no idea how important that is. But for people to find us, they need to know other people have found us. I guess that's the way it works. It's an odd labyrinth of how to get your podcast out there. But we also have our Tipster hotline, 832-847-7837. If you have any information you want to share with us, if you have a show or case idea you'd like us to take a look at. And we have our email address, which is jttipsters@gmail.com. Please feel free to email us, any information you have or any ideas or any cases you want us to cover. We're really grateful to the quality listeners that we have that give us such great story ideas and case ideas that we may not even have known about, that we're really happy to cover and to shine a light on a case that might need a little extra help. We big believers in it takes a village, and we are happy to be part of the village. And if you have a case that you think isn't getting the attention it needs, we would love to take a look at it. We'd be honored to take a look at it, honestly. So please enjoy this interview with Chief David McDavid of Zachary, Louisiana. So we're really grateful that our guest today is Chief David McDavid from the Zachary Police Department in Zachary, Louisiana. Thank you so much, Chief McDavid, for taking your time today.
You're so welcome. Enjoy it.
We are, I've been kind of pimping this podcast for a couple of weeks because I know Mark is listening, and I know we both have partners, but I'm madly in love with you because you're awesome and amazing. And Mark isn't jealous at all. And you take so little credit for everything you've done. That's just another thing I totally adore about you too, is that you're just such a salt of the earth person. And it feels to me like you have that thing that I think the best people in law enforcement have, which is you got into the business to get the bad guy.
Correct.
Yeah, that just seems to me that's the through line that any person I talk to in law enforcement, the good ones, just want to get the bad guy. And I feel like this was a unusual opportunity, especially because I'm going to guess the Zachary Police Department isn't huge.
No, we're probably about a 35-man force right now.
Okay, so you have people split into different departments. And how long were you with Zachary Police Department before you became a detective?
I started in 1984 right out of high school. I worked part-time and as a reserve from 94 to 1988. And in 1988, I went to the Basic Training Police Academy at LSU January 10th, 1988. And I became a detective from 89 to 91. Went back in uniform patrol from 91 to probably 94. And I went back in detectives in 1994 and stayed in there till 2010.
So it's we're going to go back to 1992, and if hopefully I'm correct, that's your first kind of exposure to Derrick Todd Lee?
That's correct.
So you were back in uniform. You were not a detective at the time, but you ran into him because of his deeds as a burglar?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's the kind of guy that, in my mind, has a whole lot in common, and I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, with the Golden State Killer. And that he starts young, he's in his early 20s, and he's a peeper, and small burglaries, ends up in people's homes, when he shouldn't be there, gets, eventually chased down for that. It sounds like he was like a rabbit on the run a lot like the Golden State Killer, who was almost caught several times before he, slipped through everyone's hands and went on to do terrible things. So what's your first time running into Derrick Todd Lee?
We ran into him probably in 1992, November 1992, 21st of November 1992. And that was in reference to a burglary that happened probably about a block or two from the neighborhood where Connie Warner was killed at. Okay.
And now is this, you actually catch him in the middle of the burglary, or you catch him after?
Several of our officers were dispatched to a house, which is, like I say, is across the street from where the Connie Warner case happened. About 25 minutes after midnight, we got a call reference to a guy in a house. The homeowner had came home and called him in the house and asked him what he was doing there. He stated that he was looking for somebody and ran out the house, jumped on a bike, rode the bike down to the graveyard, which is next to the neighborhood where all the our murders happened, jumped into a car and took off northbound on Highway 964, heading back towards where he lived at.
Wow. So even more like the Golden State Killer, I was unaware of the bike reference, because that's exactly one of the things that Joseph James D'Angelo did. It's so amazing, these two different men in two different parts of the world, but having still some of the same MO. It's so scary to think. So a man comes home and there's Derrick Todd Lee in his 20s in his house and saying he's looking for someone, a friend of his. I think he said Monroe, someone named Monroe. And the homeowner's like, yeah, no, not here, get out. So he's finally arrested. He gets, a fine and some probation, which he gets a lot of times. And that is one of the things that bothers me, is how many times he appeared on the radar. But I think you're one of the people, if not the only person, who really caught the number of times he was on the radar, which made him a much more viable suspect than anyone could imagine. So in 1992, are you one of the first people that respond to the Randy Meebauer scene?
That was in 1997.
Oh, that was in 97. I'm sorry. So in 1992, Connie Warner goes missing.
That's correct.
Did you respond to her scene?
No, I did not. I was off that day, and like I say, Connie Warner, where I lived at my parents' house, a neighborhood over from where I'm at now, her parents and her lived 3 houses up from my parents.
Oh, wow.
Daughter grew up there, too.
Oh, wow.
The Connie Warner case was August 23rd, 1992, which is before the home burglary, which is November 21st, 1992. And, I didn't get to respond to that, but I worked on it later on. I helped canvass the area and talk to many residents in the area on that case. So
Connie Warner is taken from her, is it from her carport or from her garage, from her home?
What it appeared to be from the photographs I observed, in that she was cross-stitching, was sitting in her chair. Evidently somebody knocked on the door. She responded to that door, and at that time you could see where a struggle happened in the bedroom. The mattress and that was in disarray. The covers was in disarray. You could also see where there was blood spots in the washroom where the wash and dryer were at, which led out to the carport where her vehicle was at.
Okay, and her carport's there. I mean, her car's in the carport, but her keys are not.
Our keys are missing, and we discover in the back seat of the car it appears to be some type of human possible vomit and plus blood that was also mixed in. But also in the back trunk of the car we found appears to be some hair, possibly some blood. So do you think he used her own car to transport her somewhere and then brought her car back? Yes, most definitely, because later on in 97 we found out that he was parking his vehicle at a little local place we call a honky-tonk Ballroom.
Mm-hmm.
He was there, which is across the street from the graveyard,
Right.
which 100, 200 yards from the neighborhood.
Which is, again, the details are just, giving me chills. The same thing that they believe Joseph James D'Angelo did, which is park a car within, a certain amount of feet, walk, run, bike to get to the car. And he had this penchant for this graveyard or series of graveyards, I guess, that would, there were developments that were around it. So that was, I don't want to call it his hunting ground, but it kind of sounds like his hunting ground.
Most definitely. I mean, he used that graveyard to, go in, hide out, go in between the where he was parking at, and go into the neighborhood.
I guess I never thought about it. You think it's wide open and graves are usually not that tall, although apparently probably in the South they're, they have large monuments. Maybe it's easier to hide, but it just doesn't seem like something I would think would be useful. But apparently he found his place to hide, some places to go to get away quickly. It's just such an odd thing. The cemetery thing, it just was such an odd thing. When I kept reading it, kept coming up, and it was, I guess, is one of them like a segregated cemetery for blacks only?
There is a cemetery where mostly blacks are buried there. There is two other cemeteries that are connected to it.
Right.
They're connected right there, right beside the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I guess I'd never thought about that, but it makes sense that, cemeteries, large amount of land, and then they develop the land around it, and you have a bunch of developments around it, which, could make for an easy. It's just I'm so fascinated with the mind that thinks of these things. So I didn't realize that Connie Warner probably answered the door, and it seems like this was his MO. And I'm originally from Kentucky, and in the South, even though Kentucky was neutral during the Civil War, people still consider it the South. You answer your door. If someone knocks on your door, you answer and especially in the time in the 90s, in the early 90s, you would answer your door. Someone could be lost, or, as the advent of cell phones became, more popular, less likely you're going to answer your door because somebody can call AAA. But if, someone needs help, it's like a Southern way. It's a Southern thing. And I think he preyed on that. Like, I'm going to call it the kindness of strangers. I mean, I think he preyed on people who answered their door. I was really amazed at the woman. I'm not sure if she was the teacher. The woman that he, I think her name was maybe Colleen Walker. He had kind of pushed his way into her apartment.
Yeah.
And talked to her and said, I think we should date.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, that's not happening. And she pushed him out somehow. She pushed him out and then constantly kept reporting that he was hanging around her home, peeping in windows.
Yes.
And then he came back after he gets, some jail time. He comes back and finds out she's moved, which is brilliant. It's frightening that she had to disrupt her life this way. But, she was smart to not be there the next time he came calling. It's such an odd MO. Have you ever heard of another killer using that as a ruse?
Not that I know of. Like I say, I knew Colette because I grew up with her, and she's a little bit older than I am. And yeah, we did surveillance up there where she lived. Actually, we had got word that he was hitting that area pretty hard, which is in St. Francisville. Which I kind of found it odd that he was, trying to chase women, back in his own hometown. Most go outside the realm of their hometown, and not where where they're not noticed.
Oh, okay, yeah. And there were like footprints outside in the mud, and yeah. I mean, there were so many. I hate to say there were so many signs. But there were so many signs pointing toward him. And I feel like you were, if not the first, one of the only people that saw the signs and thought, it's this guy. So I don't know if there were any, other than small offenses, for several years. And then is it 1997 or 1998 with Michelle Chapman and her date at the cemetery?
Well, Michelle Chapman and them were, Connie Warner was August 92.
Right.
Then you had the burglary, which was November 21st, 1992, and then Michelle Chapman was in the graveyard April 3rd, 1993.
93. Okay. So that's right. It was 93 when Michelle is with her boyfriend in the graveyard, and a person with a 3-foot machete kind of breaks into the car while she and her boyfriend are, expressing their intimacies, I guess, and cuts the shit out of them with a 3-foot machete. A police officer, was it Troy Eubanks? It was Troy Eubanks, I think. Pulls up, shines his light in, and sees the dome light and thinks something's wrong. Derrick Todd Lee runs out of the car, but comes back and grabs the keys.
Correct.
And runs through the graveyard again as his getaway. Now, when I had said 97 or 98 because that's the part that's just killing me here, is that a sketch isn't really formed until 97 or 98. Michelle Chapman is like, that's the guy. And by then, here's a question I have for you, because this is killing me. How is the statute of limitations up when someone is using a 3-foot machete and hacking 2 people? In my mind, how is that not like attempted murder?
Well, when I wrote the warrant, and let's see here, I got let me look at it here. I still got the photo lined up. I made a copy of it that she signed March 1st, 1999, 3:22 p.m., and she picked him out without hesitation.
Right.
I brought this to the DA's office, and the statute of limitations ran out after 5 years. So,
what would the charge have been, though? What would the charge have been?
Aggravated battery.
No kidding.
Yes.
Is it because their injuries weren't enough to be considered attempted murder? Because a 3-foot knife, that's...
And like I said, I had to go back and look at it. I'm not for sure. Attempted murder might have been, the statute was 5 years also. But,
wow.
I know that, because I have it on here, offense, attempted murder, 2 counts. And
oh, okay.
Yes, I had to go back and look at my notes. But, yes, so, I submitted that to the DA's office, and it said, we can't charge him because the statute of limitations ran out on him.
I think
that's amazing.
Yeah, the statute of limitations of being 5 or 6 years with something that deadly, I don't understand, but I guess that's one of those things I'm never going to get. So in 1998, is this when Randy Meebauer goes missing?
Well, let me go back to 1997.
Sure.
We had him back in the neighborhood. Now, let me see. From 93, around that time, I think he got into a little trouble. He moved off. He was possibly in the Lake Charles area, which is to the west of here. He came back to Louisiana. In 1997, we have him back in that neighborhood on July 31st, 1997. He was peeping in a house of a teacher who was a single white female who had a daughter. Her house butted up to Connie Warner's house.
Oh, my God.
He was in her window peeping, and we got the call that a black male was in the area, looking into the window. He took off running. We got many calls that night of him in different areas within, I'd say, a half a mile. And when you went up to the street to a place we called Divorce Road, which is an apartment complex, he was seen standing in a little kid's pool looking in the window at an apartment complex. We get the call there. We go to that area. He's left the scene. Now, I'm patrolling in the area. I come out to help. They had 2 or 3 men on duty. I come out to help with the canine officer. And I come across him, an area called East Eagle, which is where the area he was in 1992 where he committed the burglary. He crosses probably about 20, 30 yards in front of my truck and goes into a wooded area behind some houses. So we back out, and we know we back out. I get a call from an officer who lives in the neighborhood. Now, you got to take this into consideration. We had 4 to 5 officers living in this neighborhood. These murders happened.
Wow.
This is a neighborhood, probably maybe 50, maybe 60 homes in it. if not less. He calls us and says, "Hey, are y'all chasing the guy, black male?" And I said, "Yes, we are." He says, "Look, I dealt with a guy here recently, a while back, who had parked his Chevrolet step-side truck over there at the Honky Tonk Bar. I caught him around my neighborhood, which is, he lives probably 2 or 3 blocks away from Connie Warner, but he was at the stop sign by where Connie Warner's house, in between Connie Warner's house and Randy Midbury's house. He had stopped him there, asked him what he was doing. He says, my truck broke down. I'm looking, somebody to come help me jump my truck off. But he had gloves and a knife on him.
Right.
And the officer brings him back, brought him back to that, where he parked his truck. The truck automatically cranks up and he leaves and goes. So he lets me know that. So we backed out of the area during the peeping Tom incident. We put on night vision goggles. We caught him coming across. He looked around a building and saw we had his vehicle blocked in. By that time, we was on top of him. He couldn't get out the area. He was dressed in all black, and he had some, nice dress shoes on that night.
Maybe he'd gone out before looking around windows, because he was known to be a bit of a ladies' man who enjoyed, as you say, the honky tonk, heading out to different clubs and being a fancy dresser. So he is trying to get back to his truck after going around peeping in windows, and you got him. Yeah. And so by this time, you've had 5 or 6 years of this shit, of his behavior, and you have to have already put this together. But when did it dawn on you, he's more trouble than I think?
Well, like I said, I went back into Texas in '94. I began looking at the Connie Warner case and the Michelle Chapman case. And it kind of gave me some ideas of what was happening here.
Because of the keys?
It really got ramped up when Randy Midbury went missing August 19, 1998. And, I was out of town playing softball. My partner called me and said, "Look, we got a white female missing. We got blood all in the house. Her body's nowhere to be found. The child was left there at the house. I need to come back." So, then I tell him on the way, "You know who this is. You know it's Derrick Todd Lee.
Yeah.
Looking at him, we got to get this guy and talk to him."
So her keys are missing too. So now Connie Warner's keys are missing, and honestly, Mother Nature is Mother Nature, but I feel like Mother Nature is responsible for the fact that Connie isn't ever going to be definitively connected to Derrick Todd Lee because of Hurricane Andrew.
That's great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go back to cases too. During Michelle Chapman, it was raining that night. They just luckily had their dome light on inside the car. And the reason why I say that is because that same time that night, the First Baptist Church in Zachary was hit by lightning and caught on fire.
Wow.
So storm. Connie Warner night, during that time, Hurricane Andrew was coming in. You had storms all around the area. And I think during Randy Midbury, we had some rain too.
Wow.
So, that had a lot to do with it. Of course, Connie Warner's keys were missing. Michelle Chapman's keys were taken. And then when Randy Midbury was reported missing, her car had appeared to be utilized to move her body also, and her keys were missing.
Wow. Okay, so I have only 874,000 questions, and I know we can't keep you here forever, but when you are speaking to him, and it's been, said that he wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, did you feel that he had any sort of educational, disability?
Somewhat, but he was very streetwise.
Right.
He was smart. He knew what we knew. He knew we didn't have a whole lot on him on the Randy Midbury case. That's why I think he let us in the house until the point where I got into his closet and began around. I think he realized I was about to discover something, and that's why he come in on me. And it's like the hair stood up on the back of my neck, pushed him back, and I trying to figure out who let it go, who wasn't paying attention, because we had him in And it bothered me real bad because, he could have just took me out right then and there.
Exactly. I mean, it wouldn't have gone good for him with everyone else in the house, but I can't even imagine how you felt. So that's 1998, and you get a search warrant, and he allows you to come in, or did you just knock and say, "Hey, we wanna look around"?
We did a knock and talk. We didn't have a whole lot for a search warrant. We took a chance of what we had, and we were looking for some pants and stuff like that, kind of see what he might have been wearing. We kind of talked to him. He was nice and let us in. I mean, he was very cooperative until I went into that bedroom and went in that closet.
So do you think he had like a key ring, like a place to keep his keys, all the keys he's taken?
Yeah, because one side of the closet was very neat and everything was folded nice, and the other side of the closet was disarranged and dirty. And I felt like we had something there, but like I say, he asked us to leave at that time.
So his side of the closet was OCD neat, and his wife was just like most of us throwing stuff in the closet to get it out of the room.
So this is Mark. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So we're in 1998, and you suspect that he's involved in this murder.
Yes.
You go into his house, and it's not you don't have a search warrant. He let you in voluntarily. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so that's why he could kick you out once you get to the closet. He was able to say leave, and by the time you get back, it's presumably, did you go back and get a search warrant, or what?
We didn't have it.
They didn't have enough, he said.
I see. I get it.
But one of the things I love the most about what Chief McDavid is saying is the hair on the back of his neck stood up, which is one of those things that we all need to take a minute and pause. And if somebody makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, it's probably not because they're a great guy. It's probably because there's something inherently in our brains and in our gut that lets us know this is someone, it's our self-defense, mechanism. It's this guy is someone to be aware of, to be wary of. And that must have been as scary as shit, that you're looking in his closet and you're probably close to something and he's right behind you. I mean, that probably, do you ever have nightmares about that?
It bothered me for a long time, like I say, until we got him off the street. Because, like I said before, I had to worry about my wife, my daughter. Of course. We all live, within, a mile and a half from the murder scenes and that. So, and the areas he was starting to pick on later on were getting closer to where my mother lived. And,
God.
I lived that too. So, I was worried about that. And dealing with this guy, I knew his capabilities. I saw the crime scene photographs and other cases in Baton Rouge and around the area. So I knew what he was capable of doing.
So that's a really good point that you brought up. And another wonderful reason to have such respect for you is that you are afraid for the women in the community. And we're talking about an area of about 600,000 people or so, something like that. A couple of cities put together, Baton Rouge, Zachary, St. Francisville. Yeah.
Yeah, that area. Yeah, if you combine all them, yeah. Zachary back again was probably around, I'd say maybe 10, 11,000. I'd have to go back and research, but around that area.
Right.
Yes.
So at this time, much like, in the 70s with the Golden State Killer, every woman you probably know in your jurisdiction is buying a gun, tasers, pepper spray, taking classes, hopefully getting extra locks for the door. God forbid somebody runs out of gas or needs to use someone's phone because they're going to be screwed. Nobody's going to answer their door anymore.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You had a community besides Zachary and Baton Rouge, the LSU, where the students go to college at. It was some fear going on, and had a lot of people worried. And when the next case was coming in, and of course that happened later on, it started coming in, ever so often, every 3 or 4, up to 9 months at a time, he was hitting.
So he's still peeping and doing, his horrible stuff, and then I feel like there was something that was a stressor. I mean, and I'm not a profiler, and apparently the profilers were way off base, thinking it's a white male, a single white male, in his 20s to 30s. Yeah, so it seems like his wife had gotten a settlement because her father had an accident, and they lived off that for a while, but blew through it pretty quickly. And then November of 2001, I think, they file for bankruptcy for like $85,000 worth of credit card debt. And things were closing in where they were going to have their house repossessed. So he's kind of working menial jobs. He's driving a truck, a delivery truck for a construction company, and doing some things. And is his wife, Jacqueline, the entire time, is she working at the post office?
The time I met her, she was working at a convenience store there in St. Francisville.
Okay.
The time I talked to her several times, yes.
Okay. So she's working menial jobs. He's working menial jobs. They're still together. He has this odd separate life that's sort of combined into his regular life, where his girlfriend Cassandra and their son Derrick, who later on has, his own murder charge, they're all sort of together in a weird family. It sounds like he kind of thought he was a cult leader or something, that he could have women everywhere. And apparently he had girlfriends for many years that he let live. He didn't kill them. Yeah. Yeah. What a interesting guy. So I feel like November of 2001, shit sort of hits the fan, and he starts amping up his attacks. Instead of years separating them, they're months separating them.
Yes. I mean, you had the one that started September 23rd, 2001. That was Gina Wilson Green.
Right.
Then you had Geraldine DeSoto, which was January 14th, 2002, which is 4 months later.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had Christina Moore, which never was connected to him, but it was in the general area where all the other cases happened. That was May 24th, 2002. Then you had Murray Pace, which was in the LSU area, which happened May 31st, 2002. And that then you had, Denise Alexandra, which happened July 9th, 2002, which she escaped and lived because her son came home.
Right.
And then you had Pam Kennemore, who was July 12th, 2002.
So Ms. Alexander, thank you for bringing that up. She's at home, and someone knocks on her door asking to use her phone. And he comes in and attempts to rape her and beats her, and then tries to strangle her with her own telephone cord.
That's correct.
And her son comes home, much like Officer Eubanks coming into the cemetery and chasing him away. Her son comes home and chases him away. And this is the first time that a true sketch is done of this suspect. A true sketch that is not a white guy with a thin nose and a white Chevy. It's a sketch of what happened. And if I'm not mistaken, was not DNA taken off of the phone cord that was then sent to DNA Print Genomics? And they were like, oh no, not a white skinny guy with a long nose and a long face, but someone who's 85% African American.
Yeah, so we had a sketch too that Michelle Chapman did, and what was so eerie about it was that where the incident happened with Diane Alexander was we never got to see that sketch until later on. And if you match our sketch up to her sketch, I mean, it was a dead ringer.
Gosh.
And that's like I said, again, this case taught me a lot about sharing information.
Thank you.
Local law enforcement.
Thank you.
Make sure everybody, because it got to where, they were swabbing people in our area we didn't know nothing about, and I don't know if it was, because, there had people in the legislature saying it might be a cop doing this because it appeared to be somebody doing surveillance, which he was doing surveillance. He was watching their houses. But, it got to where nobody would share information, and I think that hurt us there for a while.
That, Chief McDavid, is the most important point of anything that we say here today. That is the thing that bothers me greatly, and I can never tell. You've given me another idea of why that might have happened. If there was if it was suspected that it was someone in law enforcement, I understand keeping things close to the vest. I understand you need to keep some things back so that if you actually do capture someone, you and they are the only ones who know. You can't let everything out because there are people with mental illnesses who confess to things, or, there's lots of reasons why you do what you do. However, I get angry and feel like it's ego that keeps some things from being shared. And I love that you just said, this is what made me really get these things need to be shared. I'm going to say this, and I don't want to sound like I'm condemning anyone, but I feel like if more people had listened to you earlier, fewer women would have been murdered.
Well, and that's rightfully so. And like I say, we had a meeting right after Gina Wilson Green, Gina Wilson Green was murdered in September. We had a meeting with state police, Baton Rouge City, EBR, all
the task force. The task force is put together, and you presented the cases of why you thought it was Derrick Todd Lee.
Yeah, and like I said, we looked at her case, and what really, made it even more that we thought it was Derrick Todd Lee because some of her articles were found close to where Connie Warner was dumped at.
So he had places he went and hunted and places he went and dumped people. That's
correct. Like I say, he probably went back there, dumped her articles there, relived Connie Warner, relived her, and that's that gratification they get out of as a serial killer.
Right. That's the mindset that, wow. So, all right, so there's the task force, and you present what you think, and they're like, oh, no, it's a white guy. And then Diane Alexander, and then DNA print genomics, and then you're on the right track.
That's
so
right.
Yes, so and this is one of those things I love. It's a tip, kind of a tip from. And the reason that our podcast is named just the Tip-Sters is because I'm a 12-year-old boy and it's a dick joke. But it's also we understand the importance of tips. And James Odom, who owned a supermarket, his son is a sheriff's detective.
Yes.
And he's like, I heard a story about this guy. I think Derrick Todd Lee is involved in Randy Meebauer's murder. And
that's correct.
Yeah. And he, is like, look, I think my dad's right. And he ends up, is it Danny Mixon? Is he the state attorney general's investigator?
Yeah, Danny Mixon, like I say, worked on this case a lot. And like I said, Danny has passed away, and may he rest in peace. He did a lot of work on this case. And what happened with the James Odom deal was we had a guy that was in jail in the Felicianas who was very close to Derrick Todd Lee. And what I did was I went to the judge and got him released. I think he was on some warrants for some traffic or something like that. I got him released to get close to Derrick Todd Lee. Derrick Todd Lee wouldn't share nothing with him either. He did not share nothing with nobody. We had him out close to Derrick Todd Lee for a while.
Wow. But you or Mr. Mixon lays out, probably with your help, a timeline of attacks that are happening, things that are happening when Derrick Todd Lee is in and out of prison. So when he's been released, or jail, when he's been released from, peeping or burglary or, attacking or home invasion, women end up dead when he's out.
Yeah.
Women end up dead.
Yeah, Danny did a wonderful job on this timeline. It was mostly Danny. We had a little input, but Danny worked hard on this. And what Danny did was he started out with victim one, which is Connie Warner. And how he laid out this timeline, he began with, he had laid out victim, began job, left job. When Derrick Todd Lee left the job, what company he was with, what agency dealt with the victims, was he in jail, what vehicle did he drive, what was the homicide date, what date was it found, and where was the body found. So, yeah, he did a wonderful job and laid this out all the way up to Carrie Yoder, which was the last victim in 2000, March 2003.
Do you really believe that Miss Yoder is the last victim?
No, I think that the lady that came up missing in Fort Allen, can't think of her name right now. His cell phone was in the area where she came up missing, but I think he felt like she could kind of look like Pam Kennemore's mother, and I think that's why he took her right there in broad daylight.
I think he, whether he knew it or not, subconsciously maybe, the noose is tightening.
Yeah, Mary Fowler, that's right.
Yeah. I think he knew something was going to happen, whether he knew it or not, whether it was conscious or not. I think he knew something was going to trip him up and he was going to get caught soon. So you and Investigator Mixon get a warrant for his DNA. Now, I'm going to ask you your opinion, and you can answer or not, but do you think he knew what the fuck was happening? Do you think he had any idea what DNA was and what was going to happen until maybe after you took the DNA and then someone maybe told him, look, buddy, you're in the shit now?
I think he had to know because he left. I mean, he had to know what was coming, but I think we caught him off guard.
Okay.
Before, I was doing surveillance on him. He was back and forth out of his house. We were waiting on a warrant to get signed by a judge in the Felicianas. He came back to the house. They got the warrant. We stayed on top of him. We all pulled up at the same time. As soon as he saw me, he didn't want nothing to do with Zachary PD. I left because this was very important that we got his DNA. That's something we've been looking at him, and if you go back, being a small agency, we didn't know a whole lot about DNA. Never really had training on DNA. So we thought this was very important. Throughout the years of investigation, we needed some DNA on him, and we finally got it.
Here's you. It's 2003. You're, yelling and screaming and holding up signs. Derrick Todd Lee, please take a look at Derrick Todd Lee. Please put him at the top of the list, Derrick Todd Lee. And you're the guy who's like, we have a warrant for your DNA. And he's, uncomfortable and maybe, acting like I don't want anything to do with you. And you're like, oh, that's okay. I'll back off and let someone else do it because you know what the important outcome is to get the DNA. So when I talk about law enforcement having a big ego, I feel like you want somebody with a big ego investigating your cases, but you also want someone who can put their ego aside and realize what the common outcome is, what the big picture is, and what the important point is. And that was you. You were the guy who knew all along who it was. And you went against, the profilers and the task force. And you're like a one-man band. You're like, here I am. Look at me. Hello. I think it's Derrick Todd Lee. And you were like, no, I don't care who gets his DNA. I don't care where you get it. You go get it. And they got it. And 3 weeks later, they find him connected to more cases than I can even imagine. It had to be, I think it's kind of interesting, I guess, was he mowing his grass when you all pulled up to get his DNA?
Yeah, he had came back. We were back and forth. He'd go into different areas. We'd kind of lose him a little bit. He started then mowing the grass. Like I said, when we pulled up, he saw me. He says, I don't want nothing to do with him. I got my truck and left and went up the street, stayed away from him.
And then 3 weeks later, on a Sunday, May 25th, I think, you're mowing your grass.
Correct.
And you get a call saying, we got him.
Yeah, they told me that we needed to be down at the task force office, which is down by the airport in Baton Rouge, and that they needed to speak to me, that we got some DNA, our DNA evidence came back and was connected to the South Louisiana serial killer. So
after his voluntary allowing someone to take his DNA, you think that he got it, that the noose is tightening, and he and his wife and his 2 kids split. And they go on the run. And they go to, Chicago?
Chicago first, and they come back, and I think he leaves and goes to Atlanta after that.
Okay, so his wife and kids are still in Chicago, and he goes to Atlanta, and he's staying at a motor lodge. And apparently he is, winning friends, and oh, he's so handsome and he's such a great guy and everyone loves him, but he can't help who he is, and he makes a few women uncomfortable by inviting them to his room for cognac. Yeah. And he's, using the line, my wife and I are having, troubles and I'm staying here at the hotel, but everyone just loves him. What a great guy. He, the Motor Lodge manager had a birthday party and Derrick Todd Lee was the guy who did all the barbecuing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's those things. And they're human beings, the people that are so capable of inflicting such harm and terror are human beings. So he's there, barbecuing. But I just can't help but think back, stabbing someone 80 times, which in everyone's rule book means you have to know them. And he didn't know her. Stomping on someone's body with your booted foot. I don't, and I guess we could talk forever about what happened to him. I know his real father had mental issues, but his mother divorced him and remarried someone who, it sounds like they tried. It sounds like they tried to make a better life for him. I mean, is there any indication that, like, his mother was nuts?
No. Times we talked to him when we were looking for him, and the guys up there that worked in that parish also knew her. It didn't appear to be. I think he just had a lot of issues, and started out as a juvenile because he had some arrested juveniles for burglaries and peeping too.
As a teenager, yeah. I mean, these are the things, and I realized that. And no offense to his mother, I just was wondering why he had such anger at women. But these are the things that happen. People put down the McDonald triad and think that it's old school and it doesn't apply. But, torturing animals, setting fires, and, wetting the bed, those are, kind of things that might give you a clue that there's a problem later. And if you get someone in therapy, maybe you can help them, maybe not. But being a teenager who peeps on other teenage girls and being the kid known in the neighborhood as the kid who tortures animals, hindsight being 2020, that's the kind of kid you want to get a hold of early and hopefully get some help.
Yes. Because
I think he exhibited, the fact that he was in his 20s when his early 20s when Connie Warner, what happened to her. And I just feel like it was the luck of Hurricane Andrew that kept him from being tied to her. But we know he was tied to her. So when you said, his friend was let out to get near him and talk, and he gave up nothing, this is the part that kills me. He's convicted of 2 of the murders, and we're pretty sure he's probably committed between 8 and 9, if not more.
Correct.
I think there's probably more that we will not ever know about. Do you think I'm just going to throw this out there, but do you think he killed Eugenie Boisfontaine?
No, I don't think so. That was more down to the side where it could have been a possibility. It kind of looked that way, but, that story, I never got the whole story on all that case because that was later on that I found out about the case. But, I'd have to read the files and look at it. But,
sure.
I think they tried to connect him through DNA and other stuff, and I don't think that ever panned out.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how many people he was responsible for, but we know it's probably a lot more than what he, is tied to. So he's arrested, he's indicted, he's convicted of Gina DeSoto's murder, but second-degree murder, which I don't get. And then he's eventually given the death penalty for, is it for Carrie's murder?
Murray Pace.
Charlotte Murray Pace's murder. So he's finally given the death penalty. And in Louisiana, he would be given lethal injection. And I'm guessing, and I'm sure he had appeals, and those were all denied. Were you or anyone in the task force ever given the opportunity to speak to him after his arrest, indictment, and convictions?
No, his attorney wouldn't let nobody talk to him. When he went to Angola, he locked down. They had him locked down on death row, and like I say, he didn't speak to nobody, even inmates or nobody around there.
Wow. So he spent the rest of his time, alone, essentially, in Angola, which can't be pleasant. But no one in his family visited him? There was no one on the visitor's log, nothing like that?
I don't think they allow the visit on death row. I'm not sure there are routines out there. But believe me, I've been on death row. It's like being in 90-some degree heat all day long. They don't have AC in there.
Right.
I've been there, so I understand. It's pretty tough in there.
It's got to be, in which, I have two sides of me that thinks prison isn't supposed to be pleasant. You're not supposed to be given, a lot of conveniences and comforts. But then the number of people that are wrongly convicted, I have the other side of me that thinks, something humane should also be, able, So I have two sides of me for sure. But I'm glad that he really was not in a cushy white collar kind of prison. I'm glad he was in Angola. So in January of 2016, he's complaining of chest pains. And I have to say, the difference in him, maybe it's a hard life. Maybe he's, you'd like to think he's holding things in, maybe causing his body to break down physically. Maybe it's hereditary. But he looks, as time goes on, he looks puffy, like something's going on physically, which could absolutely be a heart issue when, you can kind of retain water. And he starts to look bad. He starts to look really puffy in later pictures. And in January of 2016, he's complaining of pain, and he is taken to a hospital, and it looks like he hangs on for 5 or 6 days, and then he finally succumbs to heart issues.
My understanding was, when he was brought to the hospital here in our town, which made it worse.
Of course.
And a warden that works out there lives here in my town. We grew up together, and he called and let me know, hey, we're bringing him. I don't think he was in too good of a shape then. I think he was in bad shape already. Right. When he left the prison, I think he just hung on for the time being. And that, but, like I said, I notified my men and women, hey, look, he's out there. And which I knew they had guards on him 24 hours a day, probably 2 to 3 of them. But to be on the safe side, I want my men and women to walk in and out there checking on it too.
Of course.
Didn't escape. That would have been terrible if he'd escaped again. But
my gosh.
My understanding was he was in pretty bad shape already when he left the prison. So I felt, good that I didn't think he would leave there escaping, but you never know. Miracles do happen.
Right. Yeah, he could have, rallied, but from the sound of it, it looked like he wasn't even, coherent when he left. He spent the rest of the time in the hospital until he just eventually died. So I'm going to guess that his cell is tossed, everything is looked through, and he left nothing, no word of anything,
Nothing.
That's another one, because that's a different type of personality. Most serial killers want credit for what they do. And apparently he had whatever was going on in his mind. He did not want to be known. I guess it must be a real battle in the brain of a serial killer. I want to do all this stuff and I don't want to be caught so I can continue to do it, but I want people to know it's me.
Yeah.
That's fascinating that he left nothing. So in the home that he and Jacqueline owned, were you ever able to get back to that closet?
No, wasn't. I know we went back up there. We searched under a lot of concrete slabs. The word got back to us. He might have buried some of the bodies on these concrete slabs because he worked for concrete companies.
Right.
Did that. We drained a lot of ponds and sloughs and backwaters, anything else, trying to find the body, especially a Rainy Meeber, but we never did. And to this day, either she was buried where they found the other bodies out there in between here and Lafayette in the swamp area. And, like I say, I think Camp Kennemore was luckily to be found because of surveyors, and
Right.
so I know for a fact he did kill him because we found his DNA on the pink garbage bags that were outside the door of her residency.
Right.
So we know that he committed that murder.
Yeah, that was that. Yeah, he's tied to her again. Here's Chief McDavid tying a murder to him for a body that has never been found because you spotted biological evidence on a garbage bag. And that's the kind of police work. I'll just tell you that I've had several people in the last couple of weeks say to me, "How do you sleep at night?" Because I do this podcast and I love doing this podcast, but you are one of the reasons I can sleep at night, because I know there are Chief McDavids out there who are doing the work, who are solving the crimes, who are paying attention to the details, who are open to sharing the details with other law enforcement agencies. So, you don't have to say that you're a rock star, but you're a rock star in my book. So Derrick Lee, getting to the present day, are you familiar with his case?
His son?
Yes, Derrick Todd Lee's son.
I don't know the whole details on it, but I knew about it.
So he's 19. He and his friend Valente Brooks are, shooting in their minds a rap video in Valente's bedroom, and they're using a gun, and the gun goes off, and Valente's shot in the chest. And Derrick Lee, Derrick Todd Lee's son, with Cassandra, says, "I'm so responsible for my friend's, death," and other people were saying, "Oh no, it was an accident. He did it himself." But, law enforcement who were there at the scene said he's very upset about this and he keeps expressing remorse for the death of his friend. "I think we need to talk to him." And some other family members get him to turn himself in. So here, I don't want to say it's hereditary because I don't know all of the details of the case, but I know his son, Derrick Lee, is arrested for the death of Valente Brooks. I guess it's second degree murder. He's 19 years old. And that's, the thought of it going down through generations is heartbreaking. And I don't know if you, think about that or worry about that, but do you know if his son and daughter with Jacqueline, his wife, if they still live in Chicago?
My last word I got was they were still in Chicago. I hadn't heard anything since then. I think she wanted to get out of the area as quick as she could. I think she finally realized what was going on and that he was connected, and she wanted to get away from her.
Yeah, you think being with someone for a long time and knowing their behaviors, kind of listening to what happened, I don't want to give her a pass and say that she had, Stockholm syndrome, but there aren't a lot of women who have 2 kids with someone and allow another woman to live with them and they have a child together. That's kind of tough to understand. I'm not saying Jacqueline knew what he was doing, but I think you're right. I think after the DNA was collected, she knew it wasn't going to be long. And, I would imagine if she came back, they wouldn't be very welcome, in the area. I'm going to guess.
His son had, Derrick's son had, was Derrick Jr. So, yeah, I think he would probably call a lot of teasing and bullied behind that also.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to have that your father's name when your father is a monster.
Chief, I have a question, and you may not be able to answer, but it seems to me and Melissa mentioned this earlier, that during the course of the investigation, when the task force was formed, is it correct? It sounds like you were trying to point out all along that this was Derrick Todd Lee, and it sounds like you weren't listened to, at least at first. Is that accurate?
To a point. Let me tell you how all that went. Like I said, we presented our case to them in July when the right after Gina Gina Wilson Green case, and we all met at a local FOP hall, which is Fraternal Order of Police, and we had a lunch, and we all laid out our cases. And I think they realized we had something there. But I think what really threw them off, now during the task force, a lot of my friends worked on the task force, including some guys, state police kept saying, go talk to David McDavid, go talk to David McDavid. Well, what happened was when they got the tip about the guy seeing a white truck with a white male and a female naked slumped over in there, I think that threw them for a loop, and they got focused on a white male and a white truck. I think that was fed to the profilers. They take a lot of information that's fed to them, and they come up with their synopsis. But I think, that was a wrong. It was Derrick Todd Lee's truck because his uncle had a truck. He borrowed that truck from them, and we know that. And but I think they got thrown off on the case. Of course, sometimes the egos play a role in all that. And being from a small town, I don't think they realized we had a piece of the pie that was on solid.
In other words, the I can put it this way, I guess. The eggheads were saying, these little guys from this podunk town, what do they know? We're the professionals. We're the, we're the FBI profilers.
We're the behavioral analysis unit.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
And I will be honest, I've never been more embarrassed in my life that a tip became so huge, because from what I can look at from the research, there were many more tips of someone that more closely resembled Derrick Todd Lee than it sounds like one tip of a white male driving a white truck with a half-naked female in the passenger side slumped against the window. Like one.
Yes, but they had other stuff too. And I know Murray Pace's case where a black male was seen supposedly masturbating outside our bedroom window one day. Some of that stuff was not shared to us, and we learned about that later on after he was convicted and stuff like that. And we're thinking, man, if you would just, maybe done a sketch on him or told us about him, we could have put all this together. But like I said, the whole case taught me a lot. It taught me to share information. Don't be afraid to share information. It doesn't matter who solves the case. It's a matter you got this person off the street.
There's my guy. That's you. That's you summed up right there. That's amazing.
And you're a very gracious man, sir.
You are.
Yes. Well, like I said, a lot of people working on this case together, and a lot of guys in my office and surrounding agencies. And like I say, in the beginning, early on, I called it a serial killer. People kind of looked at me funny, and I said, no, I'm telling you what's going on here. It's obvious what's going on here. You go back and look at when it started in 92, then you had the burglary in 92, you had Connie Warner in 92, then you had the graveyard, then it got quiet for a while, then here he comes again in 97. Twice, 97 we got him for peeping, 98 he reigned in Meadville. Then he gets in trouble, he leaves, and it starts back up and, again, and doesn't stop then.
But you put the pieces together and weren't afraid to widen the net. You weren't focused on one thing, like one man in a pickup truck with a woman, and you were, let's look at all of it. You had the gift of looking at the macro and the micro. So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone in the world, not just people in South Louisiana, everyone, mostly women, I'm going to say, for you being you, because you are one of the reasons I can sleep at night. So we are really grateful to you for taking the time to talk to us, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank y'all so much. Anytime, I'm glad to share my story, and hopefully, people learn, officers and citizens learn from it. Hey, if you see something, say something. You never know when you hold that piece of pie that could solve the whole thing.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chief McDavid.
Thank y'all.
Thank you so much, Chief David McDavid, for being with us this week. We had just such a wonderful time interviewing you and learned so much, such great information. And you're a stellar human being, and we're very grateful that you were able to take some time to talk to us about this pretty important case. I think that we need to know more about that sort of monster who lives among us, who we may not realize is a monster. And the reason that the Baton Rouge Serial Killer series is going to be 4 episodes is that we really need to include Sean Gillis, who his nickname, not so great either, known as the other Baton Rouge serial killer. It's just, they need their own separate names because they did their own separate horror, and we need to know who they were, who they are, who they were, what they did, and how to avoid, situations where someone like that may find us vulnerable. So that's next week. We'll wrap up the Baton Rouge Serial Killer series. And we thank you again for listening. More cowbell.
If you'd like to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/just the Tip-Sters.